Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Cosmic Weather Report with Renn Butler. Today, we're going to be exploring the archetypal patterns within the month of November, and we are blessed and honored to have Becca Tarnas with us today. Welcome, Becca.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here. It's wonderful to join you both.
Yeah. For those that maybe don't know who you are, do you want to give a little introduction?
Sure. I'm a counseling archetypal astrologer, so I work with clients one-on-one, and I also am a professor of archetypal astrology, transpersonal psychology, and active imagination, Jungian psychology, and so forth at CIIS, the California Institute of Integral Studies, and also at Pacifica Graduate Institute. So a lot of teaching and speaking and counseling kind of space that I'm in.
Yeah, wonderful. You've been doing some awesome work over the years. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Renn, I'll let you kick things off and take it away.
Okay, it's great to be here. And Becca, it's really an honor to have you joining us today. Becca is one of the hardest working archetypal astrologers I know, scholars. So.
Oh. Well, thank you for all that you offer to the field. And I don't know how you write the books at the pace that you do, but I really need to take a few leaves out of whatever guidebook you're following.
Actually, I hire some monkeys to do the typing.
Oh, I'll work on that.
There's a lot of typos though, you know. But, yeah, they start typing Moby Dick. It takes about, 8 billion tries before they finally get it. But okay, let us share the screen here. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is a chart for today. And you can see that today is a full moon. Most people will be watching this later, but you might remember this full moon. And it's quite interesting that Mars is part of this full moon. So Sun conjunct Mars in the sky, opposition moon, Sun moon opposition is what the full moon is. And it's quite a yang full moon. I actually went down to my neighborhood pub yesterday to have half a beer before dinner. And it was like rowdy in there. It was like kind of jocular and loud and busy, and the staff were quite amazed that it was so intense. And then we all realized it was the full moon, and it made total sense. Becca, how are you feeling about this full moon?
Well, it kept me up last night, and I do often have that experience with full moons that it's harder to sleep under them. And I think that makes sense both at an archetypal level and simply at a physical level, that we are more awakened by the full moon, the light of the moon. Different species will hunt by that light. So the whole natural world is more active under a full moon. And then psychologically, we can be a lot more active too. And I think the reason for that is the moon symbolizes so much of what can be unconscious. And then when the sun shines directly upon it, it highlights those things and it brings them to the surface. But it brings them to surface not in our daylight consciousness, but in our nighttime consciousness. And so it's like day comes into the sleeping world and wakes us up, but it's still the place of shadows and dreams. This particular full moon, it definitely has the intensity that you're speaking about, the conjunction with Mars, the T-square to Pluto really brings in some power and potency. And so this isn't an easy or light full moon in a lot of ways. It's really contending with some deep instinctual primal energies coming forward. Yeah.
Certainly is. It's the classic full moon in a way with that Pluto. It's primal, it's chthonic, it's the jungle within us, and great time to do sessions. So it'll be too late, but Pluto will always be with us. So this doorway will continue. So let us go forward now to November 6th, which is the first Saturday in November. Art and I last month looked at all the Saturdays in October, so people can go back and look at that. Oops, I made a mistake here. Just a second. That's by hour. This is amazing program. Let's see here.
It's a great demonstration for people who are wanting to get to know their solar fire program. Like, how do the details of this work?
You know, I had this for a while before I really clued in that I could do this, and I saw Rick doing it a while back. I think it was last spring, and I was like, okay, that is amazing. Okay, so let's see, November 6th. And I want to thank Kyle again so much for hosting these. This is our first official co-production between Psychedelics Today and Archetypal News Network, ANN, our YouTube channel. So we consider you our sister channel for sure. We'd like to be your sister channel. It really is a wonderful moment in the culture when these kind of things can be talked about like this and shared.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. I've been loving it so far. So thank you, Renn.
Welcome. Okay, well, the first thing that stands out to me is this Sun, Mercury, Mars triple conjunction. And we'll be having this all month long, actually. Mercury is moving retrograde right now, but come the middle of November, it'll move back into orb and will remain there for the rest of the month. So this is very yang centrifugal energy with the Sun, Mars. It's fierce, it's action oriented, it's very expressive, and Mercury adds a verbal element, so opens those verbal channels of self-expression. In sessions, this can be a real asset for full vocal abreaction or catharsis, for really yelling, expressing one's feelings, cursing, getting anger to the surface and then expressed outward. And it's really one of the key elements of Groff's research and understanding is that full vocal expression is very beneficial for people. And there's no reason not to do it unless you don't have a soundproof room or you're in a group session where the facilitators are not comfortable with that. But I think that's a mistake. It is better to be able to make those sound. So it's part of a very dynamic T-square with both Saturn and Uranus, and Pluto to some extent as well. Mars, the Sun, and Pluto are out of orb, but the square to Saturn is all this yang energy is meeting Saturnian resistance in various ways. We can have feelings of judgment of our yang energies, our passion, our anger, things like that. There can be a sense of delay. It's partly like driving with the brakes on, like a brake stand. We're going forward, but there's this resistance as well. And the way to consume that is to become the resistance. We need to become the inner Saturn, try to take responsibility for it and resist oneself. So dynamic tension exercises like pressing our palms together, pressing outward against a hallway or doorway, making fists and growling is that kind of clenching action is Saturn, and it's like Mars outward energy being kind of pressed in and focused. So that can really help. The Mercury Saturn component of it can bring out sometimes a sense of seeing things in the more negative light. The cup is half empty. There could sometimes be repeating negative tape loops in sessions. This would be a subset of Groff's BPM2, where the fetus is unable to escape from this no exit situation, but the mind keeps spinning, looking for a solution, but it can't seem to find one. Kind of like in Lawnmower Man, when he's trying to get out, out of the main frame and out into the web, but he can't sort of do it. Now, the other major component is Uranus is forming an opposition to the Mercury, Mars, Sun for the rest of the month, essentially. So one of the patterns could be a period of tension, kind of a slow beginning, some frustration in a session, and then after a period of that, a sense of explosive liberation. There can be discharges of energy, explosive verbal catharsis. People can just suddenly, that channel opens up. Another way it can show up is if we are not following a kind of internalized set. We don't have the discipline, or we just haven't really discovered the importance of, lying down with the eye shades and headphones. Some of the, Sun, Mars, Uranus energy can show up as kind of wildly or manically unfocused and extroverted energies. Like, the classic worst case scenario, when the client wants to leave the session room and go run down the street naked and yell at the neighbors or something like that. That would certainly I'm sure that won't happen, but it's just keep it in mind that these are very irrepressible energies, and it is really good to have that set and setting. So rather than having Saturn kind of come at you as the consequences and the problems of something like that, just follow that protocol of lying down and staying inside. I would, is a good idea. I've got a couple other thoughts on this, but Becca, if you want.
Sure. Yeah, I'll say a little bit about that T-square that you're speaking to first, and then maybe I can pass it back over to you. We had a T-square of Mars, Saturn, and Uranus earlier this year. It was at the end of June, beginning of July. And so we've already experienced these energies before during this year. And of course, the Saturn-Uranus square is going on throughout the year, into next year, into the following. So that's kind of our dominant outer planet alignment. And Mars was forming a T-square with these two in a different sign, where Mars was opposite Saturn and square to Uranus. Now Mars is opposite Uranus and square to Saturn. But it is a repetition of energy. And for those listening, it can be helpful to look back what was happening for you in late June, early July. And one warning that I'll often give with this combination of three planets is it can be accident prone. Mars Uranus is more of a risk taker. There's that impulse to kind of leap ahead, to move faster, whether that's driving faster in your car or on your motorcycle, or biking kind of recklessly down roads or paths. And that in itself, Mars Uranus can kind of have that sudden kind of risk-taking, problematic side. But with Saturn there, Saturn brings in the problematic stop. And so that's why the combination of these three really can have a kind of accident-prone quality. And so as we are moving through these transits, which are going to be here for a lot of November, Mars makes the square to Saturn. It perfects that alignment on November 10th. So 4 days after this chart that we're looking at. And then even further into the month on November 17th, that's when the Mars-Uranus opposition is exact. So we're going to be contending with this energy for a while. And I just think it's really important to really pay attention when you're driving. Make sure you have the seatbelt on. Make sure everyone in the car does. Don't try and get away with things, especially physically, when you're, in the kitchen chopping up vegetables or something for a meal. Like, really watch that knife. I've seen a lot of hospitalizations under the Saturn-Uranus square in general, and they seem to increase with Mars. So those are some of my cautionary thoughts on the Mars-Saturn-Uranus energy. Of course, that can be put to positive use as well, in terms of, it can really help us move forward with a project. The Mars-Uranus energy wants to kind of get things done quickly, and the Saturn can help provide a structure. And we generally can move forward better in those ways if we keep some of these cautionary thoughts in mind as we're proceeding with those things. So those are some of my thoughts on the Mars-Saturn-Uranus element of this, at least. And I can say more about Mercury in a little bit, but Renn, I'd love to hear what else you have prepared.
Yeah, really good points. Don't trip and chop or trip and drive. Yeah. Mars Uranus, as Becca so aptly reminded us, wants to take risks. It wants to rebel against limitations. It wants to go beyond and break free and go faster. But Saturn is there going, you won't get away with it. Be careful, slow down, stop. And so we have to become both of those sides within us. That's the holotropic principle, or the Gestalt principle in the psyche. Those words mean the same thing: wholeness, moving toward wholeness. We have to become all the parts. So become your inner resistance. And often in sessions, as I said, it can be this sort of clenching actions, like squeezing. And then you'll get to a place where you'll come sort of out of that constriction, and then the Mars Uranus can break through in a more unimpeded way.
So Becca, you're saying that that transit last happened June. How far into July did that go?
It was there for the first basically half of July, like if we use a decent world transit orb, but it was really potent right at the end of June into the beginning, like trying to see if I can get these dates off the top of my head. I think it was around July 3rd and 5th that it was exact, if I recall correctly. I didn't review those dates, but I think it was right around then. Yeah,
just you talking about all the extreme stuff. I was definitely doing a lot of extreme bike riding and pushing myself a whole bunch, but then mid July I got really sick, and it knocked me out for about a month. So as you were saying that, I was like, oh yeah, I mean,
yeah,
there's definitely some really intense energy back then for me, and kind of just boom, came to a stop.
It's a great example. Like the Mars Uranus is what's kind of pushing ahead, and then Saturn says stop in whatever way it's going to, in a problematic way, or in a kind of, I think I need to slow down kind of way, but it's going to stop you in one way or another.
Yeah, really good points. So a couple other maybe less challenging combinations include Mercury trining Jupiter will still be in orb. This can give a sense of farsightedness, grand or far-reaching insights, feelings of seeing the big picture in sessions. That this is really nice and creates a kind of optimistic sense going into sessions. And then if you are doing a session actually on that Saturday, the moon will be in a 90-degree square with Neptune. And actually we have moon Neptune, I think, on most of the Saturdays, if not all of the Saturdays in November. So this gives a more sweet and gentle quality. It's typical after a period of struggle and catharsis and release of energy and emotion, for people to have a peaceful resolutions, a sense of connection with their sitters, with Mother Nature. It's helpful for bonding. People that have unmet needs in infancy might benefit from support of physical contact. It's nice to have spiritual friends around, especially at the end, that you can hold hands with, take in some nourishment.
Can I add a little more on the Mercury alignment that you're looking at?
Sure.
So what we're seeing here is the end of Mercury trine to Jupiter and square to Pluto. And while those make exact alignments earlier in this week, so November 1st and 2nd, that's when we have the exact Mercury trine Jupiter, Mercury square Pluto. But even though it's exact earlier in the week, this is actually a much longer story that's been unfolding, and it has to do with the fact that Mercury has been retrograde it just went direct a few days ago, as we're recording here on October 20th. But basically Mercury moved back and forth in relationship to Pluto and Jupiter. And that can have a really kind of deep truth-telling quality, a revealing of things hidden from ourselves. And because it's a longer story, things that started to be uncovered in late September and early October may have their final release here, whether that is at a larger collective level, things that we might be finding out. I think the Pandora Papers is a really great example of the Mercury square Pluto. That kind of coming to the surface, or the Facebook whistleblower, that was all happening when the Mercury Pluto was really tightly aligned. But in this last phase, and maybe looking at it more personally or in terms of doing session work, if you're looking deeply within yourself and you've been in a longer process, we can actually find some very deep truths about ourselves that are revealed through this long Mercury alignment. And so that's something as well to look at if you're kind of following these larger patterns of what's been unfolding for you late September or early October, that is maybe self-knowledge that's continuing to be dug out of the depths of the unconscious and being processed. And with the trine to Jupiter, there does seem to hold a potential for a positive outcome from that this kind of deep truth telling of the Mercury Pluto comes forward in a way that ultimately I think will have positive, optimistic results. But we have to go into the deep, messy places first in our minds and our thoughts, with our intellect and so forth, in order to access that. One other thing I do notice with Mercury that happens to be exact on this day, November 6th, is that there's a lovely little Mercury Venus sextile. They're exactly aligned. Mercury and Venus can only ever get as far as a sextile apart. So this is their other relationship. Mercury and Venus can be in conjunction, or they can be in a 60-degree sextile. So here they are coming into that sextile, which can be, Renn was speaking about the moon Neptune that's coming in on Sunday of that weekend, having a really kind of sweet, gentle energy. And the Mercury Venus can also be very kind of lyrical and eloquent and sweet words, honeyed words, loving communication. It's a beautiful time to write a love poem or a love letter or something, words of the heart coming forward, or just simply a beautiful time to say, I love you. It's like the classic I love you transit. And so what a beautiful thing to have in the midst of some of these more intense dynamics that are coming through in November, is starting off with this very sweet, communicative alignment. Oh,
You're
Renn.
muted there, Renn.
I've got a mute on my mic too, and I haven't decided which one I'm using today. So, yes, indeed. It really will be some grace added to this picture, this cauldron. When you were talking about the self-knowledge and self-discovery, I just had the image of, in a session kind of going, I think I might be descended from primates, and then it's like a positive resolution. It's like, oh, not too hairy. So, yeah, really well said. Let us go forward here to November 13th. And yeah, Becca, would you like to start with that one?
Absolutely. So when we look at the transits on this day, you can see that the moon has moved. It was just past the new moon in the last chart we were looking at. The new moon was on November 4th. And so now it's moved from that conjunction out into a trine. And the moon is trine to the sun, which is really, it's worth looking at if you go out in the early evening to be able to see this, that sun trine moon, it's past that quarter moon half lit look, but it's not quite full. It has a very pregnant look, I feel the trine does. It's like it's on its way toward the full, and it's definitely waxing. It's what's called the gibbous moon. And so that's what we're seeing here. And that can be a very harmonious balance between the individual and the community. between kind of oneself and then one's emotional, relational needs and connections. And on this day, November 13th, Saturday, there's a moon Neptune conjunction as well. So it's not just sun trine moon, it's moon conjunct Neptune and sun trine Neptune. So really the archetype of Neptune is coming so much into that sun moon trine, which in itself, sun moon trine happens twice a month. But with Neptune in there, suddenly we're bringing in these themes of the sacred, the spiritual, the mystical, the magical, the enchanted, the imagination. And so themes that really relate to kind of dissolution and dreams and dissolving into the whole. With the moon Neptune conjunction in particular, we can feel especially emotionally sensitive. So if you're feeling more kind of permeable to others' emotions or experiences, if you're having a harder time differentiating what is yours and what is somebody else's, that can happen under Moon Neptune collective alignments, where we're all kind of swept up in this emotional, relational soup. And I actually think it's a really helpful time to be able to go inward, to be able to create a space that feels like a sacred sanctuary, like the home feeling like a sacred sanctuary, and doing things that feel womb-like, that feel swaddling, wrapping yourself in those really soft blankets that they now make, or drinking hot tea or taking a long warm bath and just imagining everyone's emotions that you've been picking up throughout the day kind of washing off you. So again, Neptune, it can make us really permeable in general. And when it's in connection with both of the luminaries, the sun and the moon, then we're going to be so much more permeable to others' beings, their experience, their emotions. And if you're doing anything in a kind of group setting, that's just important to be aware of, that your boundaries they're not going to be as solid. They're going to be more porous, and there'll be some emotional osmosis taking place. Renn, how about you? What are you seeing in this chart that's really standing out?
I love that image of the emotional soup. It
yeah,
really captures that Neptunian lunar feeling. Yeah, that's a great image. So yeah, I mean, the sense of mystical connections with other people, with the earth, with Mother Earth and Gaia, can be accentuated with that moon Neptune sort of warmed up by the sun. At the end of sessions, it can be so wonderful to spend time in nature, and we can have a sense of the sort of Mother Earth nurturing all the beings, in the space, and the sense of the eternal peace of nature. I'm sorry to be the one to be bringing up the Mercury Mars square Saturn, but that is a part of the soup as well. Harsh words or sounds, sometimes with Mercury Mars, we can have a feeling that there's discordant sounds in the session room, and that's one of the reasons why it's good to have headphones on, so that we can clue in that feeling of harsh or discordant sound waves are coming from within our own psyche. Like people might be dissatisfied with the music and maybe ask for a change of music. If it happens more than twice, though, there's a good chance they're projecting onto the music. And that's a fairly common thing. You think the music is too dominating, or it's sort of oppressive or something like that. And then you realize you're actually experiencing BPM 2 or BPM 3. So that's a good thing to remember as a sitter. Mercury Mars supports, as I said, full volume of expression. The Groff internalized protocols are always good to remember in medium to high dose sessions, which is, it's better if the sitters don't intervene or chat with the journeyer, but just let the journeyer, initiate any communication. So the sitters would respond to questions to, important needs that they have. But other than that, it's better if sitters just stay silent and just let the journeyer, go through whatever they need to go through. Journeyers should feel free to babble or share as much as they want, but for the most part, it's better if the sitters stay quiet. So, I'm talking here about the internalized set, and I realize that there are many other ways that people do psychedelics. I recommend that set for higher dosages, certainly. Now, the Mercury-Mars opposition Uranus really supports verbal catharsis, as we talked about, manically heated speech. People could be talking very fast. Both Mercury-Mars and Mercury-Uranus are connected with speed and, quickness, sort of directness. People could get in touch with their inner sarcasm, rapier-like wit, and there could be some zingers kind of humorously conveyed at the end of the day. And then finally, the Venus trine Uranus can enhance our access to beautifully colorful visions, rebirth motifs, brilliantly colored mandalas. We can have a sense of a rebirth of love and friendship in sessions as well. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I especially wanted to zero in on the Mercury-Uranus opposition because it is exact on this day, on this Saturday. And Mercury-Uranus, as you're saying, especially with Mars, it can be very verbal. But even if one isn't speaking, Mercury is also just the mind. It's the mental activity. And in non-ordinary states of consciousness, one of the things that we can often do is transcend the mind, move beyond the mind. And that's a great gift that these medicines afford us. But with a Mercury-Uranus alignment, we may actually find that the mind keeps coming back in. And it can be a very kind of quick intellect that's kind of sparking on lots of new or different ideas. I've sometimes referred to this Mercury-Uranus combination as the hummingbird mind, because it can feel like the mind is flitting from idea to idea, like a hummingbird is flying from flower to flower. And so on the one hand, the challenge with that can be, it's a little exhausting. There's like electric sparks going off the brain. But on the other hand, so many new ideas and insights can come forward with this. And so if you're going into that space, trying to figure something out, or trying to kind of break through to a different level of understanding, philosophically, intellectually, this can be a really supportive transit for that as well. And again, the fact that it's exact on this day is going to make it one of the more dominant alignments that are in play at this time.
Yeah. It's like a technical question for
Yeah.
those working with that energy. If it comes up in session, would you really encourage people to stick with that type of energy, or would you also want to ground it maybe post session as well? If it is like, new idea, lots of sparks flying, like would grounding that energy be really important for people post, or actually maybe sticking with all the new ideas and just kind of following that process to see where it goes?
I mean, I wouldn't want to lose what's coming up necessarily. And that can be one of the challenges, is that it goes so fast that we can forget things too. It's like sparks in and sparks out. You don't catch those hummingbirds and they're off on their way somewhere else. I do think the T-square to Saturn could be a little bit of a lightning rod that can pull some of that energy down. But if one is working with the sitter, I would actually recommend having the sitter help hold that. And if you have the kind of sitter who takes notes, for example, like you can be firing things off. And so letting it move through without getting lost in, is this going to disappear or not? And so use it in some ways, having the guide be the person who's the Saturnian container for that, of like, I got it, I will hold that for you. Don't get overly caught up in your mental processes. Because I think one challenge that could come up is if you're trying to hold on to it, you're just going to start spinning out in your mind, and then you are going to lose connection with some of the other things that are going on. All that being said, the moon Neptune is probably going to keep bringing one into the body. And I was thinking about that, Renn, as you were saying, like the music might seem really harsh, or there's loud noises, or there might be some external intrusion that's not supposed to be there. And the moon Neptune is going to make one feel even more sensitive to that. And so even maybe having some protocols in place of, you're protected, you're wrapped in your soft little womb blanket. If there's a loud noise that comes in, it's my job to deal with it. Just to navigate both sets of energies at the same time. Anyways, those are some of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, really good points. I love your image of the hummingbird. That's a nice one. It could also be like a rooster that won't shut up, or ravens or magpies. There can be this kind of squawky energy with that Mercury Mars. Yeah.
Well, the hummingbird is particularly referring to the Mercury Uranus.
Oh yeah.
The Mars is definitely what's going to bring in more of the volume for sure.
Yeah, right. So it's like a 500-pound hummingbird,
Right.
Yeah. And Mercury Uranus also can get us in touch with the cosmic trickster, with the archetype of divine comedy. It could be not uncommon to have journeyers laugh uproariously during these transits, have a kind of ecstatic reentry period, and heatedly sharing their insights. I think what Becca said is really valuable. Let the sitter do the writing, and they better limber up the wrist, because it'll be coming out in a pretty fast pace, I would imagine. If a person is really manic at the end of a session, then it probably means that they have additional BPM-3 material underlying it. And you may want to encourage them to lie down and do some yelling. If their mind is just so heated and feverish, that lie down and just kind of spin out, like let the body move, kind of give up control. And that scene in Blade Runner when the android played by Daryl Hannah gets shot. She's about to kill Harrison Ford, and he shoots her, and then she's like kind of like spinning out and stomping. That's the kind of energy that can come out under these transits, right? And that can do wonders to calm somebody's state of mind down. Just a few seconds even of that.
Yeah, it's very electrical energy, very potentially spastic kind of energy that can come through with that T-square.
Yeah, you can get in touch with our inner spaz.
Yeah.
In case we need some help with that. Okay, well, let's go forward to the full moon.
And that's on a Friday, so it's the day before the next Saturday we'll be looking at. Yeah.
Right. So essentially Thursday and Friday, right? So just before that full moon. I would say, because the moon is again lined up with Mars and with Mercury, this will be an unusually emotionally expressive full moon. In sessions, there can be increased volume, and the moon square Jupiter and the moon Uranus conjunction are very supportive for emotional breakthroughs. Our process can emerge with more self-conviction. Like with moon Jupiter, it's like turning up the volume. Things just come forth in a much more pronounced way. This is a really dynamic full moon. I definitely would not mind surfing the inner waves at this time. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, well, the full moon, when it's exact on Friday, November 19th, it's not just a full moon, it's actually a lunar eclipse. And so we're entering into eclipse season here with this lunar eclipse on the 19th, and then there'll be a total solar eclipse on December 4th. So eclipses always come in sets. It has to do with how the full moon and new moon, they're near the nodes of the moon, the point where the moon's orbit crosses the Earth's orbit. And that's how eclipses are created. And so the quality of an eclipse, lunar and solar, but in this case it's a lunar eclipse where the moon is in the Earth's shadow, it brings in a really interesting kind of archetypal energy, because the moon doesn't get to be fully illuminated as it usually is during a full moon. It's in shadow, it's the blood moon. And traditionally, from a lot of different cultures that have astrological traditions, eclipses are seen as malefic. And I wouldn't necessarily just say it's malefic, it's a bad thing, bad things will happen. It's not as simple as that. Even when we say something's malefic, it means that they're, in the same way that we approach Pluto or Saturn with a kind of caution and a recognition of its power and the potential for negative sides, an eclipse can be like that. And so it's, I think, a really good time, just in the time that it's exact. The time before, the time after, while we're still in the full moon, is a little bit different. But for people who work more in the realms of, connecting in with these energies spiritually or in a more magical way, it's good to just be mindful and cautious and respectful when we enter into these eclipse periods. And the way I've often felt about it, and this is speaking more from having witnessed a solar eclipse, there's a feeling a little of watching a cosmic or a celestial conjunctio or sacred marriage. And so that kind of respect of almost giving these archetypes their space in that period of time, rather than us trying to get that energy, to harness it in. It's a good time for prayer, not manifestation. And so any kind of medicine work that one might undertake, if one chose to do it at the time of the lunar eclipse, I think would be an experience more of prayerful engagement, rather than and a connection with the whole as well, that can bring one more into a sense of like sacred communion, really, because I feel like at some spiritual level, that's what's happening between the two luminaries. It is such an extraordinary thing, both with a solar and lunar eclipse, that these two bodies of radically different size, radically different distance from our perspective on Earth, can appear the same size. And so we have the phenomenon of the eclipses. So those are some of my thoughts on working with an eclipse, thinking of it as a time of prayer, of cleansing, of ritual bathing, and bringing into that as well the day of the full moon and the lunar eclipse is also when that Venus Uranus trine that Renn brought up before, when it becomes exact. So it's going to be really potent at this time. And Venus Uranus can be so aesthetically dazzling. And having it in a trine alignment too can be a really kind of confluent relationship between these two energies, where Uranus awakens and liberates and unleashes the heart and love and a sense of loving connection with others. It also can unleash or liberate the aesthetic sensibilities, like our actual capacity to see beauty can be more liberated, just being held in a state of kind of shocked awe or sublime relationship to beauty. So that happens to be on the same day as the lunar eclipse, which I thought was quite significant, because it's going to lend some of its flavor to this particular full moon and eclipse.
Yeah, I loved your image of the sacred marriage, the sun and moon. in
Yeah.
exact opposition. I see eclipses as just a very close full moon. It's like a super full moon in certain ways. And I love the image of, it kind of happens in the dark, or the moon is in the dark. It's like an image of a wedding, and suddenly the power goes out. And suddenly you're just surrounded by all that enchantment, and you can't really do much, but there's a lot of emotion and a lot of things happening. This will be around 1 a.m. Pacific time on Friday the 19th. So the exact eclipse won't be happening on the Thursday or the Friday days, but I've had good experiences during eclipses. And I also had a session during the Chernobyl disaster.
Wow.
I found out after the session, and I think there was an eclipse right at that time, if I remember correctly. So that was a bit of a weird one.
Wow.
Yeah. There was an outdoor shower at my dad's place, and I just remember thinking, oh no, is there like radioactivity in this water and stuff? But yeah.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So let us. Oh, we'll stay on hours here. We'll go back to about noon Pacific time. Oops.
Just forward one
Saturday,
day. Yeah.
November 20th. Yeah. So again, Sun, Mercury, Mars, that yang extroverted centrifugal energy is just so helpful for increasing sense of energy and courage and vitality in session and verbal expression. If people are not making sounds under these transits, it doesn't mean nothing, that anything is wrong. Sometimes we need to, and sometimes we don't. But ideally, sitters will be comfortable if the person needs to start yelling or, sort of vehemently expressing what's inside themselves. Now, we still have the Mars, Saturn, Uranus T-square, which is a big part of this month. And we've talked a lot about that, this tension between our desire to break free, our inner outlaw, Mars, Uranus, desire to fly. And then Mars, Saturn is more like, it's grounding. It's like having lead shoes. It's like doing things very carefully and precisely. And it's always good to follow the protocols. Lying down on our backs is actually the most open position, with limbs uncrossed. And from that position, we can actually feel and surrender to emotions the most deeply, and with the least amount of risk. Like, we're not going to hurt our backs if we're doing headstands or our necks and so on. And we can also express anger when we're lying on our back very effectively by hitting the sides of the bed, by stomping our feet on the foamy, and so on. Of course, as Becca mentioned, the Venus trine Uranus will be very close, and this does support exhilarating, sort of scintillating, ecstatic, aesthetic, vibrant, epiphanies, moments of sort of rich, rebirth experiences inflected by the Venusian archetype of beauty. And there can be a very fun and kind of irrepressible, gleeful atmosphere in the post-session period under Venus Uranus as well.
Yeah, I think peacock feathers and rainbows and kind of sparkles and that kind of dazzling aesthetic sense, where you see rainbows around the edges of everything and kind of become enraptured and fascinated by those colors, and again by the beauty. It's very captivating that can come through with that alignment. There's also a Mercury Jupiter square that is exact on that day, on November 20th. And so, Mercury, as Renn has been talking about, is a really big player throughout this month, and in alignment with so many different tracking there with the sun, being in alignment with Mars, earlier the month, Saturn, Uranus, and here now it's moved up into the square with Jupiter. And that can really bring in a kind of expansion of the mind and of the thoughts, and broadening in to new ideas and wider horizons. It's a very philosophical aspect. And just to kind of compare the difference, when before I was speaking about Mercury Uranus, which can be more, the sudden, unexpected intellectual breakthrough. Mercury Jupiter, it doesn't have that same kind of acceleration or speed, but it does have that sense of opening out into something broader, bigger, richer, more just kind of an abundance of intellectual or mental stimulation and ideas. And it can be very philosophical in the sense that, in these non-ordinary states, we can feel the kind of the grandeur of answers to some of life's questions, even if we can't always bring back the fullness and the richness of that realization. We may just be left with an image, but we know. It's like it can be tapping into that gnosis in some ways, that deep spiritual knowing of something that is a kind of divine wisdom, and we can have intimations of it when we come back to our ordinary state of consciousness. But we have this sense of having touched truth with a capital T, in the sense that Plato meant it, with a Mercury Jupiter alignment.
Beautiful experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Venus Pluto conjunction will be starting actually a little bit earlier than this, but it gets really strong toward the end of the month. So why don't we just move forward here? I can see Venus getting closer and closer by the day. Do you want to start with that one, Becca, or shall I?
Sure. I can definitely speak to it. I mean, when we're looking at Venus with Pluto, there can be such a depth and intensity to the aesthetic experience. And Venus Pluto, on the one hand, it can be kind of richly, intensely aesthetic, but in a way that almost feels destructive. And there's this really extraordinary linking of these archetypal energies with Venus and Pluto, where it's like the beauty of the underworld realm. It's the beauty of the descent. It's the beauty of even intensified suffering in some ways. And when one is working in non-ordinary states, some of the more transpersonal regions or personal regions that one could be brought into with Venus Pluto that might require some preparation or forethought is we can be brought into areas of sexual trauma, and having to work through with kind of the darker underbelly of humanity's instincts, and how that especially will relate to Venusian themes of sexuality or romance. And so I could imagine with the Venus Pluto, there might be some processing of that material, whether that's at a personal level, relationally or sexually, romantically or sexually, or at a collective level. We can go into more of those transpersonal experiences. So that would be something, if one is wanting or needing to work through that kind of material, this actually could be an extraordinarily potent date to work with. And there's this lovely kind of outlet here too, where while the Venus Pluto is tightening in, there's also a Venus Neptune sextile that's coming in as well. And that, we have this century-long sextile between Neptune and Pluto. So the Neptune Pluto sextile is nothing new. Everyone's born with it who was born since 1940. We're all going to be carrying it through about 2035. But when an inner planet or any other planet comes into alignment with one or the other, it activates the other planet. And so while Venus Pluto might be taking one, into some of these kind of Hades, Persephone dynamics, there's also that sextile to Neptune, which can bring it to a deeper level of spiritual understanding, and a kind of larger healing, encompassing context. And that very well could be a kind of progression within a session between these heavier, darker, more intensified themes with the Venus Pluto, and then bringing it more into a sense of spiritual love and connection. Like Venus Neptune is divine love, it's sacred love, and that can be, feeling oneself held in the arms of the beloved divine. So there are these two very different potentials there, and because they're linked, I can imagine they would actually be deeply interconnected. Renn, is there any more you'd want to say about those themes?
Just so evocatively conveyed, Becca. Yeah. Yeah, the Venus Pluto, primal sexual feelings, primal love, deep passions are all things that can come up under these transits. Really good point about very conducive to for the bringing forth and processing sexual traumas. For people that are interested, Stan, through his research was able to learn quite a bit about sexual pathology. And one of the books that I really recommend would be Beyond the Brain. He's got a chapter, Architecture of Emotional Disorders, and he talks a lot about sexual variations, dysfunctions, and perversions. And this mixture of pleasure with our sexual feelings with, aggression or sadomasochistic feelings, other kind of shadow elements from the underworld. Often people's sexual traumas are connected with the perinatal sexual arousal that is caused by the choking in labor that creates a kind of enforced sexual arousal. So in order to completely heal our sexual traumas, we may need to face some of the BPM3 perinatal sexual feelings too. So these transits are very supportive for that. It's a meeting of like Beauty and the Beast, be one way to see it. And Becca made the good point that Venus helps us to enjoy whatever it is interacting with. In this case, Pluto, we can, enjoy even our suffering. And if you can enjoy suffering on this planet, you've really got it made. There's a component of BPM3. With BPM2, the no exit stage of labor, there's a kind of a hellish suffering that never can, we feel it will never end subjectively. With BPM3, there's a sense of suffering that will eventually take us, to the light at the end of the tunnel. And pleasure and suffering begin to be kind of inextricably fused together. So it's hard to tell which is which. And once we reach those kind of experiences, then we can really allow more suffering to come out, because we have a sense that it's good for us, that it's consuming it from our psyches, that it's purging itself from our psyches, and we just have this ecstatic feeling that we're consuming karma somehow by going through it. I love what you said, Becca, about the Neptune Pluto being lit up here, the Venus Pluto sextile Neptune. I like to think of Neptune Pluto as like the ape and the angel, but it's not very respectful of apes. Again, with the monkey theme today for some reason. But spirit and nature is how Rick used to talk about it, and it might, one possible trajectory could be, facing sexual traumas, or maybe sexual, intense feelings, or even sadistic feelings. I don't mean like really sadistic, but I guess for some percentage of people that's possible, and kind of working through those ambivalent energies and emotions, and then it will gradually smooth out into this divine love that Becca was talking about. When Stan talks about BPM3, his final perinatal session that he writes about in The Adventure of Self-Discovery, his final perinatal session was in March 1967, and he felt that his whole being was completely taken over by the sexual archetype. He felt he could see it. He could see all the red light districts in the world, images of sexual practices of every conceivable kind from every possible side. You play all the parts in these kind of BPM3 experiences. He could hear it. He felt he could smell it, and I think the word he used, it attacked his senses with extraordinary power. And he's not given to exaggeration, so that's a pretty amazing description. And then as the BPM3 material resolves, it begins to have a spiritual component. You could have images of various kind of sexual practices of different cultures in the past, and then the highest form of it would be like this union of the divine masculine and feminine principles of yin and yang, various erotic gods and goddesses like Ares and Aphrodite, or Shiva and Shakti. And once you reach that point, the ratio of ecstasy would increase considerably. So in general, with the Venus-Pluto, a death rebirth of love and relationships, death rebirth struggle, we can have powerful responses to music, and as Becca said, aesthetic responses. Yeah. Anything else you would like to add?
I just had this image come into my memory as you were speaking about that relationship between the Venus-Pluto sextile to Neptune. There's a painting done by Alex Gray where he depicts the circle, and around, I believe there's a meditating figure in the middle of the circle, but the part that I'm remembering best is around the edges are many, many people engaged in sexual acts. And depending on which part of the circle we're at, whether we're in the upper part, which is more of like a heavenly domain, or in the lower part, those sexual acts change in the depiction. And there are all these very, very tiny figures. So you have to kind of look closely to realize what's going on there. But in the lower part, which is kind of like the Plutonic underworld, you do see a lot of depictions of sexual violence and perpetration, and it is a really quite terrifying image in a lot of ways, looking at the lower part. And in the upper part, you see these kind of sacred tantric unions, and just thinking about that kind of wheel and what we've been speaking about here with the Venus, Pluto, and Neptune. And Renn, that kind of depiction you gave of Pluto and Neptune, which they've been holding in this long sextile for many decades, of the ape and the angel, or nature and spirit. I often think about that combination as like a deep soul evolution and a deep spiritual evolution. And if we just hold that in mind, that we've had this 100-year sextile of Neptune and Pluto, and how humanity really has gone through this very profound soul evolution over these last decades. And I'm so curious what the shift is going to feel like. We've lived all of our whole lives under this alignment. What is it going to feel like in about 15 years when that moves apart? And then what is it going to feel like when they move into a square, which is the next alignment between the two of them, and how different that might be? And that's really a good area for us to just pay attention to, because the Neptune-Pluto cycle is such a long, slow cycle. It's 500 years between conjunctions. It's the rise and fall of civilizations. But the fact they've been kind of holding each other in this subtle harmonious balance for, through the 40s, 50s, 60s, through the 90s, through this last decade, like everything that's happened, that's still holding solid. And I just like to kind of dip into that deepest rhythm of the planet sometime and feel what's happening in terms of that kind of spiritual evolution and transformation for all of us and the earth community, not just humanity.
Yeah, really, really well said. And listeners may not know that Becca is quite a distinguished Tolkien scholar. Tolkien, of course, born during the most recent Neptune-Pluto conjunction, and his masterpiece, The Lord of the Rings, is this incredibly rich look at both the most grotesque, demonic, underworld, wicked elements in consciousness, the archetypal realms, but also the most pristine, refined, elevated, exquisite, angelic. The difference between the elves and the orcs, is essentially Neptune, Pluto. And as the fellowship moves southeast in their quest to relinquish the power of the ring, they pass through these bands of wickedness and then goodness, then wickedness, then goodness, and it is just an incredibly rich journey. And that's what sessions can feel like too. Hey, Becca.
Absolutely, we can be brought into that vast mythic realm that is perilous and fair, to quote Tolkien, that we see the poignant beauty of these places, these states of consciousness, these realms, I would say. And we also recognize their peril and their danger and the importance of having companions, having guides to be able to make our way through the journey and, there and back again, come back to ourselves, but with the wisdom that we've picked up along the way.
The Campbellian full return of the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
There's one more aspect that we'd like to touch on here for this final Saturday in November, and that is this grand trine of Venus, Uranus, Moon. It's hard to tell here because of because of the northerly latitude that I live in up here in Canada, but this is like an equilateral triangle between these three, almost exactly equilateral. And we've talked about the Venus Uranus, but to have the moon involved too, it's just such a sweet, shimmering beauty, the reborn feminine. Sort of Galadriel energy in many ways, though she's so very Neptunian as well. But there's a Venus Neptune as part of this alignment too. Sense of irrepressible, beautiful youth. We can identify with the cute newborns of the world, like puppies and kittens and beautiful lambs, and it has that sort of the budding shoots in spring. The social time before and after sessions can be unusually exciting and fun. This would be just such a wonderful day to do sessions, all other things considered. If you have a sitter or a sitter or two, the Sunday is also the Grand Trine will also be happening on the Sunday, at least the first half of the day. The dramatic, unexpected, exhilarating rebirth of the feminine would be one of the ways that we could describe this, and we can get in touch with that eternal youth within ourselves.
In addition, you brought in Neptune, and in addition to the Grand Trine, which is it's in the three Earth signs. As the moon moves further in Virgo, it's coming into opposition with Neptune as well. And so really what we have here is a kite configuration where we have the Grand Trine of Moon, Trine Venus, Trine Uranus, and then with the moon in opposition to Neptune, that's that bisects the grand trine. And so what we have is the Venus sextile to Neptune on one side, and then what's starting to come in, it's still on the wider side, but that Uranus Neptune sextile, which I'm eagerly awaiting to see how that's going to feel. It's the first Uranus Neptune alignment since the 90s, the conjunction. It's not going to be as potent as the 90s conjunction, of course. It's not a hard aspect, but it's still going to be there. And I think that for those who are sensitive to these kinds of energies, when you have something like the moon or Venus coming into a major aspect pattern with these outer planets, you start to get an early glimpse of, well, what is that awakened creative imagination going to look like in the next few years as that unfolds? And that's something that I think can be so helpful in sessions, is we're experiencing what's here, but we're also getting a glimpse forward of what is to come. And we can actually feel into transits that are starting to enter into the collective or the personal field. And they can really give us a sense of, well, how do I want to live this? How do I want to work with this in my day-to-day life, not just in sessions, but in the everyday lived experience? And so this kite configuration could actually give us a kind of glimpse of what that's going to feel like and what the next several years are going to be in terms of this kind of activated spiritual imaginal awakening that Uranus Neptune can bring.
Yes, so true. So this is the alignment. So Venus sextile Neptune, Neptune sextile Uranus. Becca mentioned this is still a little wide, but in the applying phase, and we can get a taste of it because it's part of this configuration. And then Moon opposition Neptune. And the kite suggests buoyancy. There's a lot of lift with this, and to have both Uranus and Neptune involved in this alignment, it truly gives it that elevating, ascending, uplifting quality. And then the feminine archetypes, it would be like the most perfect day with your child flying a kite, and a beautiful, colorful kite, or maybe there's a lot of other kites out there, like a Chinese New Year, or a beautiful day on the the windy park, and where just there's a sense of wildness, but it's also kind of connected with us on an emotional level. We're feeling it. We're feeling the pull of the wind and the beauty, and everyone's happy, and truly be a very exciting day to put up the lightning rod, as Rick used to say, and lie back and let that lightning come through. This beautiful lightning with this Venus and Moon, and
just to add yet another aspect to this, but it's part of the configuration we've been looking at, is there is also a Mars-Neptune trine that's very tight over that weekend. It's exact on the 29th. And that Mars-Neptune trine, it actually forms sextiles on either side to Venus as well. This isn't an aspect pattern that has an official name in astrology, but I like to call it a humble trine, because it's kind of like the inverse of a grand trine. Instead of 3 big trines, it's 1 trine and 2 sextiles. And so Mars with, am I reading that correctly? That it's...
Yes.
Yeah, I am reading that correctly. Okay. Suddenly I just doubted myself because of the house system. It had them further apart. But yes, we do have Mars sextile Venus, and then Venus sextile Neptune, Mars trine to Neptune. And the Mars-Neptune trine in particular can also be really, really supportive for psychedelic work, because Mars is... it brings that sense of courage, that sense of bravery when entering into the Neptunian non-ordinary state. And so the fact that that's also part of this configuration we've been looking at with Venus, Uranus, Venus, Neptune, Mars, Venus, Mars, Neptune, the moon, there's so much going on here, all at soft angles. It's a really beautiful configuration, very kind of dazzling array of so many of the archetypes in connection with each other. So that was the last aspect I wanted to speak to.
Yeah, very well said. You called it a humble trine?
Yes, I've been calling it a humble trine, the trine and 2 sextiles.
Yeah, good one. Yeah. I've never seen a proper place where all the different aspect configurations are listed, but there's probably room for a few more. Yeah.
Right. Well, awesome. This is really great. And I guess to close things out, anything that you want to close with, Becca? You have any, I guess, like upcoming events or anything that you want to pitch?
I have an archetypal astrology introductory course that is it's an evergreen course, so it's available on in perpetuity online. It's all pre-recorded, and so anyone who might want to dip into a six session course, and I imagine that it can be complementary to the kinds of amazing courses that Renn has been offering. You know, we come out of the same lineage in terms of archetypal astrology, so there's probably a lot of complementary themes, but maybe we each fill in different elements as well.
And what's your website? Where can people find you?
My website is www.beccatarnas.com. So it's just my name.com.
Pretty simple. Yeah. Awesome.
Yes. Yeah.
How about you, Renn?
I highly recommend people get Becca's Evergreen course. I'm sure it is brilliant and evocative and rich, and I highly recommend that, and certainly complementary to my approach and the approach of so many of our archetypal astrology colleagues. I've started my new online course. We're 3 weeks into it. It's not too late for people to join. If you want to join, it'd be wonderful to have you. And it's Saturdays at noon, 21-week course, and that includes a slideshow that I send out ahead of time. Stay tuned for my article on galactic astrology. It's a new layer of astrology that I'm pretty excited about. We're going to make a YouTube video out of it, and with some graphics and pictures and some special effects and so on. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Sounds really cool.
That sounds great. I can't wait to read it.
It's been really fun doing this with you, Becca. I appreciate your experience and your articulate ability to convey the archetypes very much.
Thank you. And likewise, thank you for bringing all your wisdom and experience into this space, and what an extraordinary guidance that you're able to offer to the listeners coming through both of the programs that you each offer. So thank you both, and thank you, Kyle, for hosting.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kyle.
Kyle, it's a pleasure. I love it.
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to?
Yeah, you know, if for those listening, love to hear some of your comments or questions. So drop that in the comments section below, and be sure to subscribe to our channels here at Psychedelics Today and the Archetypal News Network. And then so you can get some notifications, and we'll be seeing you each month for this Cosmic Weather Report. So yeah, this is November, so tune in for December after this one.
Yeah, and just really appreciate you and Joe very much for sponsoring this or hosting this. Thank you so much, and just a great opportunity. I will probably have James Moran back for next month. So
perfect.
Wonderful. All right, well, thank you everybody, and we'll catch you next time. So take care.
Bye.